Hey Internet, welcome back to What's the Points? I'm Mike. Today I'd like to go over the Jetblue Status Challenge. If you've been paying attention to Frequent Miler, they've had a couple episodes now on this historic challenge of theirs. They call it the 25 for 25. And having reached their 25th birthday, they're offering an opportunity to earn status for 25 years and earn more than 1/3 miles along the way if you finish 25 segments. I planned this out for myself, even living on the West Coast. I didn't think I would even be able to come up with a feasible itinerary, and I did. And so I wanted to share this with you because despite all of the detail that Frequent Miler went into, I didn't see them give a specific example of how they mapped it out for themselves. So for me, living on the West Coast, I thought, okay, this is a worthy challenge. How would this even be feasible? So I was able to do it spread out over 3 trips, each a week or under. And so I'd like to give you the specific example because I put hours of work into this. And part of why it took so long was because figuring out the whole structure of it, I've never done anything like this. How to piece it together and what the sort of basic organization of it might look like, how to even get started, was kind of overwhelming, and I had 1,000 browser tabs open. So I figured if I could share this, then hopefully it'll help others figure out if this sounds interesting, if it sounds feasible, and if it sounds affordable. And I would encourage you, if it's all 3 of those things and you can do it without messing up either your job or your relationships, I say go for it. And I'll talk about what my plans are at the end of this video. So if this sounds interesting to you, please stick around and like and subscribe so that more people can enjoy this content and participate in this growing credit card community where we all lift each other up. So the details of this, basically, if you hit 15 segments, then that's 15 airports. So that's part of the terms. Each time you land in an airport, whether or not it's a layover, you get credit for 1 destination. Once you've hit 15 destinations, JetBlue awards you 150,000 points. Once you hit 20 destinations, you get an additional 200,000 points, bringing you up to 350K in total. So you can see how this is working here. If you've made it to 15, there's really no reason you shouldn't push on to 20 and get that a huge amount more points. And then if you can squeeze in an additional 5, then you will get Mosaic 1 status for 25 years. There's not much to it. If you read the JetBlue webpage, it's pretty easy to understand. The fine print is not that fine, and you can pretty much interpret it right away, but just at a very high level. And by the way, this is through the end of the year. So starting now, July 22nd, 2025, you have through the end of this year to complete all of these, and you don't have to register for it, which is cool. Oh, one other thing first too is I would recommend you get some kind of status. Right now they have a specific 2 specific promotions. One is if you have American Airlines status, you can match over to Mosaic 2 instead of just Mosaic 1. Or what looks like more fun, but you have to be kind of last minute spontaneous because they only announce it a week ahead of time. There's this Dunkin' branded plane. If you're able to fly on it, then you'll get a status match opportunity with that too. Normally meeting a status match challenge would be difficult for most people unless you're road warriors. In this case, if you're taking on this challenge, most likely you'll be able to meet it and extend that status for longer than the period. Even if you don't, I think it'll, just having it for those 3 months, it'll make this a more pleasant and hopefully more frugal experience where you can get preferred seating and check bags, that kind of thing if you need it. And so why is this even interesting to me living on the West Coast? JetBlue, as you may know, has formed this new partnership with United. So it's a little bit like the partnership between Alaska and American. Now, Alaska and American, as you know, they're both in the One World Alliance, but they have a specific partnership that goes beyond that, where they recognize each other's status in terms of upgrades and a lot of other features. And in essence, you are getting almost all of the same benefits if you have Alaska status flying American and vice versa. Well, now it's the same with JetBlue and United. So you see where I'm going with this. United has over half of the flights in and out of San Francisco, which is incredible because it's a very large airport with a huge number of airlines and destinations. So United really has a huge hub here. And as you may also know, earning United status, it's tough, and it doesn't have any of the hacks that non-flying spend hacks, other than just putting incredible amounts of spend on their credit cards, much more than you have to with really any other carrier, even with this latest refresh where they make it a slight bit easier. So that's really the interest. It's a little clunky because, you know, every time you book United, if you want to have your status recognized, you got to make sure you put in your JetBlue number. So that means, for example, you're earning JetBlue miles instead of United miles when you do that. So if you're living on the West Coast, that might be of more limited utility. On the other hand, I think as they keep enhancing this partnership, hopefully, then you'll still be able to book United flights and other Star Alliance partners, even though I don't think they're completely integrated into the Star Alliance network yet. And if JetBlue gets bought out by United, then presumably you would get official United status from that point. So I think even if you don't live in a JetBlue hub, if you can make this work, then as long as you fly United or JetBlue, then this could be worth it. So having gotten that all out of the way, let's dive right in. All right, so my first trip here is going to be a week long, and it starts with flying from California, where I live, from SFO, San Francisco Airport, directly nonstop to JFK. The next day, I would be doing a short trip to Rochester, New York, and then turning around and flying to Hyannis on the coast, back to the coast. You know, that looks like a really cool place to stay. And the next day, taking a bus up to Boston, to Buffalo Airport. And by the way, I've highlighted in bold each time I'm flying to an airport for the first time. Stay in Buffalo for the night. And by the way, one more thing here. This is just an example. You know, each of these, if you see a destination, you're like, well, I don't want to just fly in and out of there. I want to actually stay there. Well, yeah, this is just an example of where sometimes I have a specific reason. I know friends or family, or there's an event going on. But that's kind of the gist of this. If you're going to do this in sort of 3 trips, then you have to plan on maybe only really getting to leave the airport and enjoy these places for less than a day, or maybe a day. I mean, you could extend it as much as you have free time, but if you're like me and you need to get back to the grind, then you know you probably need to keep it moving. And so then the Buffalo to Boston after you've stayed in Buffalo, and then from Boston to Nantucket, which is a place that I've always wanted to visit. Stay there overnight. The next day, fly to LaGuardia, which is one of 3 airports in New York City. And so this was strategic because, as you know, JetBlue, their major hubs are Boston and JFK. But they do have some flights out of the other 2 New York airports. It's just they're hard to find. So that's what I liked about this first trip, is because there was an opportunity here to fly from Nantucket directly to LaGuardia. It's a short distance, and it was a little pricey. It was $400. But keep in mind, some of those airports are only open in the summer, and they only run till, I think, like mid-October. So keep that in mind, and if you're looking to fly to some of these smaller airports, you know, that's just part of the price of admission. And I haven't even gotten into redemptions. Again, check out Frequent Miler, but there's a lot of different ways other than just cash. You can also use points. You can transfer them in from multiple banks, and you know, each of them have different transfer ratios. But you know, Citibank and Chase give you the 1-to-1. Amex is next on the list, but you got to pay a tax on top of that. You know, you can also use the American Express Business Platinum, and if you make JetBlue your chosen airline, now you can use your Amex points and get a 35% rebate on those. And in doing so, you're probably going to beat out using the JetBlue points because A, you don't have to transfer them and deal with that loss. But B, JetBlue, like any airline that you choose, will see those bookings made with points from Amex as revenue fares. And in doing so, you'll be earning base miles and bonus miles if you have status. So that also helps with the overall, you know, value that you're getting from this. So wrapping up this first trip here. So LaGuardia, and then LaGuardia, all the way down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is a bit of a trek. But when you're not living near the main hubs, you got to plan on having a little bit more mileage. And there is a little bit of some hub action going on in Florida. I highly recommend the Flight Connections tool. Indispensable. That and also Google Flights was absolutely essential. In particular, the feature where you put in your origin airport, but then you leave the destination blank, and when you click on that blank, it'll say anywhere, and it'll bring up an interactive map where you can zoom in, and it'll show you the price to each of those. And you can still use the filters if you want to look at non-stops. And so that is a good complement to Flight Connections. And you could probably get away without using Flight Connections, but Flight Connections is where you can zoom in and kind of get the picture and be like, okay, well, here's the different hubs and minor hubs, and here's all the stuff in the Bahamas and the Caribbean and around Florida and all of that. So really, you've got your northeast chunk, you've got your southeast minor hub, and you have a few flights to Europe. I wouldn't really look at that too closely because it's probably not worth it for the amount of time unless you can find good deals and you really wanted to go to Europe, but I don't think it's going to be efficient for this challenge because JetBlue has no connecting flights within Europe. And this is the major challenge with how few hubs there are, is having to keep going back to the same hubs over and over. Having said all that, that concludes our first trip, is then flying back to SFO from Fort Lauderdale. Okay, now I'll walk you through the next two trips just really quickly, just now that you have a sense of how this works, just so that you can see, counting this all up, again, each of these new airports I put as bold and kept counting until I got to 25. Trip 2, JFK to DCA, which is the Reagan National Airport. And then immediately, a couple hours later, flying to West Palm Beach in Florida. And so again, we're doing this northeast to southeast hop because you'll notice in that first trip, I've really checked off as many of those northeast destinations as I practically could. I was finding that if I were to make a trip back there was really no efficient way for me to get enough airports in a compressed amount of time. So that's why this second time I'm focusing more on the southeast. We're getting all the way down with that stop in DCA to PBI, which is West Palm Beach, and that's in that second day. So, and then the next day, we're doing a round trip out and back to Raleigh. You can hang out in Raleigh, but I think for some of these segments, you should just plan on just hanging out at the airport and then coming right back, honestly, and save some of your energy for some of these others, because the next day I actually have Nassau in the Bahamas. That's also round trip, but I happened to find that you could fly in the morning. It's a short enough flight that you could come back in the evening and still spend most of the day there. Now the next day, again, we're going back to this out and back, same day without leaving the airport, to Charleston, South Carolina, again from Fort Lauderdale. Day 5, we're going Fort Lauderdale to Cancun, Mexico. I was surprised by how close this was, and that's a destination I've always wanted to go to. So let's say you stayed there a day, but you could stay there as many days as you want. The final day flying back to SFO. Now we're getting to trip 3. Trip 3 is the longest. So we're gonna go all the way from SFO, Puerto Rico, San Juan. Next day, we can fly to St. Croix in the US Virgin Islands. The flight options are a little limited there with JetBlue. I think there's only one flight per day at $340, but it's a very short flight and was really inexpensive when I looked. It was only $55, which is great. So staying there a day and landing in Santo Domingo, which is the capital of Dominican Republic. And there's a lot of cool stuff to do there. So you can stay however many days you want. But presuming you leave the next day, then we're going to fly to Orlando, Florida. Notice now this is the third destination we've flown to in Florida. So then from there, you can do another relatively short flight to Richmond, Virginia. And then finally, from there, we're flying into Boston again and connecting to Syracuse, New York. That one's a long travel day. We're starting at 9:45 in the morning, and when we're all said and done, we're landing at 11:15 in Syracuse. So that day is kind of tough. You might break that up, but just in this case, because this is already going to be the longest trip at 7 days, and I'm trying not to be away every weekend, I think that's one other way you can do it. Obviously, the closer you live to these hubs, the easier it is to kind of piecemeal one bit at a time. But if you want to knock it out in just sort of 3 continuous trips, again, this is a good way to do it if you have a lot of stamina and patience for sitting on airplanes for long periods of time, day after day. which I haven't tried that yet. I'm kind of curious to see how it would go, and hopefully I wouldn't just burn out and get sick of flying forever. So day 5 now, Syracuse, jogging back to JFK, and then flying to Pittsburgh. That same day, Pittsburgh back to JFK again, and now to Charleston, South Carolina. Flying to Philadelphia the next day, Philadelphia to Buffalo. We'll stay a night in Buffalo. And the next day, finally, Buffalo to LAX. And if you're getting back to San Francisco, as you might imagine, JetBlue does not fly there. So obviously I did not include any other flights, but that's actually the only example. This is kind of amazing. There were a few occasions when to see if there wasn't a different airline that would get me there if it was an airport that I already landed in for less money, but it wasn't. So I think that was the one thing that was encouraging about all of this. You know, when I added up all of the amount that was spent, I think it was something around about 3,000. So let's say 3,000 or 230,000 membership rewards points if you're using the Business Platinum. So your net gain from spending 230,000 membership rewards points is 350,000 bonus miles, plus however many miles you earned along the way from all of these would be considered revenue fares. So that would be a pretty good amount, and 25 years of status. You know, that might be tricky to put a value on that, what that's worth. One caveat that I've heard in the Discord forums is that United does not recognize status above Mosaic 1. Let me know in the comments if you know differently from that. That is a bit of a disincentive if you're looking to do this primarily for the partner benefits on United. Bear in mind if that you want to continue flying JetBlue enough to reach beyond Mosaic 1 status each year, you might not need to. I would say at a minimum, you could look at this and say that you're getting most of the benefits of the United Club Card, minus the lounges. If you really care about the lounges, that is sort of one weakness of this strategy, but you could still get that Club Card. But the cool thing is you would get most of those benefits from the Club Card, including one especially great benefit that you do not get from any credit card, which is the ability to select economy plus seats at check-in. Those seats are usually worth over $100 per segment. Being able to potentially get that on every flight is great. Now, bear in mind, a lot of those are going to get scooped up and offered to the higher levels of status first. So if you're flying hub to hub, you might not always get them. I think it's certainly worth a few hundred a year if you're flying at all. So, break out your calculators and see how much that's worth to you. But yeah, this is, I don't think this is something you do because you're going to just get absolutely rich with points. I think it would be really fun to do. Now, spoiler alert, I've decided not to do this, not because I don't want to, but because I'm already overcommitted for travel this year. I have a lot more trips coming up. If I hadn't, I probably would be doing it just to say that I had, because it sounds like a fun adventure. I'd get to visit a lot of new locations, some of which would be a criminally short amount of time, but it sounds really fun. And it's definitely given me some ideas of new places to go. And, kudos to JetBlue. I think even if you're not doing this challenge, it's really opened my eyes to how many places they fly to. I just wish that they, kind of like Southwest, had more non-hub to non-hub. They're so focused on having such a small hub that if they didn't have this partnership with United, I wouldn't have even looked twice at this. But because of that adds a really interesting dimension here. And if you do fly United a lot, but not quite enough to hit silver each year, which is not that hard to do, right? You need like 10,000 PQP each year, which is like roughly equivalent to, assuming no other PQP from other sources earned, $10,000. That's just to hit the entry level. I mean, imagine that. Every single year, you got to spend $10,000 flying United Airlines just to hit that first level. And that's just now. That could go, it will go up. It goes up, every couple of years or whatever. And so this would lock you in for 25 years of having that first tier of status. That could be really cool if you plan on flying for a good chunk of time and you think that you'll be flying on United or JetBlue a good amount. This is, it's worth checking out because it's, between the free check bags and the priority customer service, other elite benefits, Yeah, it's super intriguing. So let me know what you think, and let's take care of each other. Ciao for now. And oh, and please like and subscribe. Peace.